Welcome, everyone. This is Bobby Harris, the Executive Director of the Utility Broadband Alliance, on with you again today. And as you're getting settled in, I want to just point out a few things. While all of our attendees are in listen-only mode, like the recording said, you are able to type in questions for our panel here using the question tool on your little toolpad there. Just remember, when we get to the questions, I will read them word for word, so try to type them very well. We won't say who typed, but I will read them exactly as you type them, and we'll do our best to get to all of the questions before time runs out. Obviously, if we don't get to your question, our panelists have agreed to follow up with you directly to make sure you get the answer to your question. But I'm really honored to have two great UBBA members on this webinar today. We've been very fortunate to have strong industry leaders on the Utility Broadband Alliance membership. And here today, we have two of those that have been in the industry for a really long time, but have always been willing to share their knowledge and their experience whenever anyone calls. And so today's topic, we're talking about those critical elements when you're assessing private wireless spectrum and the solutions that are offered out there by EWA. But we want to really let our panelists set the stage, and we're just going to have a conversation today, and I'm loving that. First, we've got Robin Cohen, the president and CEO of the Enterprise Wireless Alliance, and a great friend of the UBBA also. And with her is Randy Neck, who I've known forever and ever. Randy's now the president of Rosenberger Network Solutions. And so we're just really fortunate to have both of these guys on with us today. I'm going to go silent and let them just have a conversation and lead us through. But I encourage everyone who's on the webinar to really think through your questions and get those ready so we can come to them towards the end. So Randy, I'm going to turn it to you, sir.
All righty, thanks, Bobby. I'm really happy to be here today, and of course joined by my my friend Robin Cohen, especially for the topic of spectrum. I thought we'd begin by setting the stage a bit for what we have to discuss with a little bit of my own EWA experience before jumping into some Q&A. So, Robin, as you know, I've been involved with EWA in a number of different ways, and for a long time, as a member, as a user of the services, as a partner, and as a board member, and even as my own career has taken me to different companies over the years. All during that time, I've always found EWA to play a really valuable role for me when it comes to spectrum issues of all kinds. So my hope is that that others on this call might find EWA to be just as helpful or more helpful to them as a result of the webinar. So, Robin, for the people who may not be that familiar with the Enterprise Wireless Alliance, tell us a little bit about the organization.
Well, let me start. Thank you, Randy. Appreciate those kind words, and obviously love still having you as a member and on the board and all of that. And Bobby, thank you for the opportunity for EWA to be able to present to the UBBA membership. This is a great opportunity, I think, for everybody. EWA, for those of you that are not familiar with EWA, we were formed in 1953. So we've been around for obviously, was that 70 some years, 72 years, doing the math in my head. And we're certified by the Federal Communications Commission to provide spectrum solutions in the Part 90 bands, which is primarily UHF, VHF, 800 and 900. Outside of frequency coordination, we also assist with FCC licensing matters, anywhere from renewals and construction notifications, along with assignments and transfers of control, spectrum leasing, all the different kinds of applications, along with experimental licensing that quite a few people need assistance with through the OET website. So we do handle much more than just Part 90 frequency coordination. One of the other things I want to mention too is, our membership is comprised of, we're pretty diverse, and we're comprised of business enterprises like utilities, but we also have wireless sales and service providers, private carrier operators. We also have the vendors. Primarily, it's LMR vendors at this point, but it's growing as we're not 100% always focused on LMR. I mean, that is our core business, but as we all know, and as you all know that are attending, broadband is the future too. So there's much more opportunities out there from that perspective. The other thing I wanted to mention was we also have, just speaking of just expanding, we have an MOU, which is a memorandum of understanding with the FCC related to interference mitigation for industrial business licensees when there's an interference issue. And it's much like, so APCO has it on the public safety side, EWA has it on the business industrial side. And we've had that for probably about 20 years now. And when folks reach out to us, the first step is to obviously check from a licensing standpoint. And then we go from there to see if there's obviously, if it's an unlicensed situation and things like that. We process probably about 18,000 applications a year. I think that that shows, the volume of EWA's market share from an industrial business, along with, we handle SMR and private carrier applications as well in the various bands. So it just shows the scope of what we're capable of, in addition to the additional FCC licensing that we can handle for folks.
When you and I first talked about this webinar and the chance for me to participate in it, it took all of about maybe 1 second, maybe less, for me to reply with an enthusiastic yes.
I didn't even have to try to sell you on it. It was pretty quick.
Well, and for good reason. Look, this is a topic that's, of course, I'm personally very interested in, but also because of what I would describe as Spectrum is a place that's the cornerstone of private wireless. There's so much riding on decisions about Spectrum because so many other important decisions build on the foundational ones that it's really hard to overstate the importance of it. But despite industry efforts and progress that we've made as an industry over the years, the sense that I get is I'm not sure the FCC really has a full appreciation yet for just how critical Spectrum really is to the utilities, and especially in the evolving needs for utilities. As an industry, I think we still have some work to do there, some ongoing work to do. What advocacy initiatives is EWA pursuing on behalf of utilities?
Well, I'll tell you. So from an advocacy perspective, again, we're not 100% utility. Our membership is diverse, so we're representing all interests within the private wireless industry, which I think is, we're I think the only trade association that does do that for the private wireless industry. So some of the things I will say, it's helpful to utilities. It's also helpful to the many other types of licensees that are out there. One of which that's worth mentioning is 800 megahertz. So 800 megahertz EWA, we filed a petition. Yeah. It's been a few years. So I'll get to the FCC response time on some of this in a bit. But that petition was basically, right now, there's pool allocations within the 800 megahertz band. So if you're an SMR, you can apply for SMR and general category. If you're a business industrial, you can apply for business industrial and general category. If you're public safety, you can apply in your own pool of public safety and general category. General category obviously is everybody can access. And then what they have is also intercategory sharing currently, which allows public safety and business industrial to dip in each other's pools. But you have to exhaust your own pool before you do that. And the thing that was concerning to EWA, and it's very near and dear to my heart because my history, with my career, I came from the Nextel side and with rebanding and all that, and rebanding at 800 megahertz created a melting pot. And you have public safety agencies that are on SMR spectrum. You have SMR entities on business industrial spectrum. And anytime that those entities want to add a site or move a site, they have to show that they stay within contour, and they may need, inter service concurrence from like the public safety coordinator if they're on public safety. It's just a mess. And because they created that melting pot, we just thought it was important to like go to the commission and say, you need to like make the whole band general category because you got a little bit of everybody everywhere. So that's one example. Another example is UHF and VHF. Currently, there's a petition, another petition that's been on file for a few years now to remove the concurrence requirements at UHF and VHF. And what does that mean? So probably 20 years ago, the FCC merged like a lot of the different pool allocations, telephone maintenance, motion picture, all that, and put them all into two buckets: public safety or industrial business. But at that time, they retained an allocation for power channels, special emergency, automobile emergency channels, railroad, and one other. And we look at that going, they're all subject to the same exact rules. There's no reason why. So EWA, if we have a customer and we find a power channel that is perfect with their technical requirements, we can't certify it. We have to go to UTC to get concurrence. And then, there's, a concurrence fee. It also adds time. It just seems crazy to have such burdens like that. And then another example is having to go to AAA on a special automobile emergency channel. And, they were one of the entities that actually filed against it, saying, that they needed the channels. And we did the research in the ULS data, and it actually showed that there literally were no automobile emergency entities on the frequency. So I'm not quite sure why they think it's important to retain their allocation, but that's another example of just, regulatory burdens that we just feel is not necessary in today's day and age. 900 megahertz, another example. The 3x3 transition's been going on for quite some time. EWA was an advocate for that. We're an advocate for the 5x5 with the pending petition that's on file with the FCC. We are one of the parties that filed, the petition for rulemaking at the time. And, one of the pieces of criteria that we thought was important was that incumbents, it has to be voluntary and that incumbents would be protected. And that was the only way we would sign on to the petition to offer broadband at 5x5. So we just see these as a lot of opportunities in these different spectrum bands to alleviate regulatory burdens by filing a petition for rulemaking to change the rules, with these pool allocations, but then also future with opening things up to permit broadband in certain bands too.
Well, you've obviously had the front row seat to how private wireless has really come a long way over the years, and maybe especially over just the last few years. I mean, it is evidenced by some of the things that you mentioned, and even the rapid growth of UBBA as an organization, the 900 megahertz broadband ruling, CBRS, pending 800 megahertz applications currently. It's a pretty cool and active place to be these days. Lots of players, lots of moving parts. So I guess my question beyond advocacy, how else does EWA contribute to the private wireless industry?
Great question. One of the big things I think right out of the gates is the National Wireless Communications Council, NWCC, formerly the LMCC. All coordinators are members of it. Outside of that, you have some manufacturers that are members of it. And one key piece with, advocacy positions in front of the FCC, there's times where having a greater voice get you somewhere, as opposed to just EWA filing something, or one of the other coordinators individually. So with the NWCC, there are times with certain initiatives, we meet twice a year, but everything in between, if there's a specific proceeding that the commission issues a public notice on and wants comments on, and we think it's a good idea to chime in on it, EWA monitors like literally everything that comes out of the commission to see if it's something that we need to respond to on behalf of our membership. And we seek input from our membership too, because sometimes we may not be, because we're not down on the, heels on the ground, have no idea like on certain things if it's worth chiming in on it. But it's like as soon as we bring it up with our members, they're just like, oh, absolutely. Like one recently was on signal boosters. That's something important. But the NWCC, I think, is very important because it allows us to have that united voice going into the commission on certain things. And EWA manages it, and we bring those topics, to the NWCC membership, and we have the experts, from each of the different coordinating committees and things like that, and their in-house or outside counsel that assist with, comment forming and such. Outside of that, we have an annual conference. I think primarily every single one of them do. Like I know UTC does, APCO does. There's, different ones that all of us attend as well that are much larger, but our annual conference, we have a lot of great topics this year. Veterans in the workforce. What's more important than that is like and it's educating people on our industry. Not that many people, coming out of college know anything about private wireless. Not, same thing with veterans, like that are, coming out of the military. They don't know where they would fit in private wireless because they're familiar with, the carriers, but outside of that, they're not familiar with our world. So we think it's important to stay on top of that. AI in building wireless, that's pretty, that's been going on for quite some time, and there's hundreds of thousands of BDAs deployed throughout the country. So it's something that we try to keep in front of everybody with hot topics like that at our annual conference. One other comment too is EWA just recently expanded into Canada, which I don't know if anybody on here saw like the communication, the press release that went out about that, but I know Randy, you were very familiar since you're a member and on the board. And a lot of people are like, why expand into Canada? So we created the Canadian Wireless Alliance, and along with some manufacturers that basically came to us and said, we need an EWA in Canada. We'd like to think it's gonna help with border issues. I know at the FCC, applications get held up because of, harmful interference returns and things like that. And one of the things we learned when we formed the Canadian Wireless Alliance this summer from the Canadians is they're like, oh, well, the FCC does the same thing to us. So that's something that's important to us, is to try to see if we can work with both sides of the border to see if we can streamline some of those processes too.
Now, along with the evolution of private wireless in terms of policy changes, in terms of available spectrum options, in terms of a growing list of use cases, certainly for utilities, there's also this, I guess I would describe it as this entire minefield of things for utilities to navigate through and to think about to make sure they get spectrum decisions right. And that can be one of the trickiest aspects, I guess, as I see it, of planning and building and operating private networks these days. And on top of that, there's also the need to keep an eye on who knows what might lie ahead, right? So, for example, you got on the technical side, you got things to think about like coverage and capacity. You've got the availability question. Has someone else already gobbled up all of the good stuff in an area where the spectrum is needed? And if you clear those first two hurdles, there's more right behind it. Then you get to affordability, you get to ecosystem of devices, and of course how to stay on top of all of the rules and compliance. And I'm sure I'm just touching on a few things here. I'm sure EWA deals with all of those things and maybe others every day. So given all of those things going through the minds of utilities, tell us a little bit about EWA's services, especially ones that could most benefit UBBA members.
So one thing I think is worth mentioning related to the different spectrum bands and like things like that, I know I rattled off, primarily UHF, VHF, and 800 and 900, but there's other opportunities that are out there. And when we have customers contact us, we get some crazy questions, and it's one of the things I tell my staff like all the time. And if we don't know the answer, we're going to find out the answer. And that's, one of the things I like to tout is that's where a lot of the compliments come from. A lot of the customers is like, even if we don't know the answer, we go find it. And we try to understand the rules associated with different spectrum bands to be able to recommend them. If it was already auctioned, we look at, the auction data and all of that. But in addition to that consulting side of the business, which we do a lot of, and it's growing, more and more reliance on EWA's expertise. And again, if we don't know, we will become an expert, and we will share that information to get you on the right path as to what spectrum band would be helpful. We have services that we have been expanding on for many years now, one of which is license management. What's worse than losing a license, right? And everybody has what I call their day job, and staying on top of your renewal deadlines and your construction notifications and such. License management is where you basically provide your FRNs to EWA, and it could be you as the utility. It could be some of the utilities, obviously there's multiple different subsidiaries, and sometimes they act separately, so it's like trying to manage all of that. It could be like a huge data set and a huge list of call signs. EWA manages about 32,000 call signs on behalf of our members, and we send out notifications 90 days prior, just like the FCC does. 90 days, 60 days, 30 days. But then the best part, in my opinion, is that if we don't hear from you and that deadline's looming after the 30-day notification, we pick up the phone and we call you. We call you or anybody else, that's showing as your representative for your company to say, do you need assistance with this? Because the next stop is EWA can actually help you do the filings. If you're too busy or you're out in the field and you need assistance with it. So we have that service that we've perfected for over a decade now, and it's continuously growing. Another one is License Bank, and this I think is probably one of the best tools that could help utilities. We actually created it a few years ago for a large business enterprise, and the service is basically what I call like a repository of like all of your FCC licenses, so you don't have to share your ULS password with numerous employees across your company. You share it with EWA, and our service actually downloads the original license from your ULS profile, and it goes into this repository, and then all of your employees have a login and password to be able to like go into this EWA License Bank tool instead of the ULS, and they're able to access the original licenses that they need. They can search for them too. Like it gives them the ability to search, saying, oh, I know that we have a license in Austin, Texas. Where is it? And just don't know what the call sign is, and you're able to search it from that perspective. And the request came from a utility. that needed it.
Interesting.
So yeah, so we have that. We launched that probably about 4 or 5 years ago, and it's growing from that perspective. Spectrum Intel is another one that we launched about, I guess it was probably about 3 years ago. And as a frequency coordinator, we're required to download the FCC's data, the ULS data, on a daily basis. We do it daily, and then we do like a weekly snapshot, because there are times that, you know, there's hiccups in the FCC data when it's downloaded, and we recognize that. So we do the weekly snapshot to make sure that it captures any of the issues that the FCC was having on their end. But we're required to download that to support all of our frequency coordination tools. So we are just like, there's a lot of people out there that would like to be able to, what I call data mining, and the ULS, you know, the fact that they've been having some issues with it over the past few years with the slowness helps me sell it, which is horrible to say, but it's true. But outside of that, we download the data, and it allows you to research it. You know, you could say, you know, give me all 20K emission designators. I'm going to use Austin, Texas as the example again for some reason, but in Austin, Texas, and you get the results in like 2 seconds, and you can export it in a spreadsheet. And then you can slice and dice it however you want to. We're very proud of this tool. We love it. A lot of people, and it allows you to research different fields that the interface of the ULS doesn't allow you to do. So
I think any of us that have spent any time at all with ULS, and I have, would recognize the pain that you just described in terms of reliability, in terms of speed or lack of speed and responsiveness. It can be incredibly cumbersome to try to get a data that's needed if you're just simply relying on ULS. It's
and
been
we have
a painful experience for me personally.
yeah, so we launched it with just Part 90 site-based data, because that's our bread and butter right out of the gates, and we have that. We download all the databases, so we download the market-based data, and we have it in what I call our ULS mirror. But as you probably all know, there's different fields. There's differences between looking at a site-based license and a market-based license. There's different fields. You know, site-based has, you know, much more granular data. Market-based doesn't. But market-based also then has, you know, different data, like if it was partitioned and disaggregated and such. So that's the next data set that's going in. It's in the works, and we're close. It's a huge data set. That's one of the biggest hurdles right now, but it's the next thing on the agenda. Microwave. So, you know, we plan on putting all this in. The unfortunate thing, I think it's fortunate and unfortunate, is the way that the FCC posts this data on their website for entities to download. It's all separated like that. So you have Part 90 site-based is one data set. Market-based is another data set. And then you have microwave, that's a different data set, et cetera. So, you know, cellular, different data set. So it's like the way that they have it structured is how we're downloading it and implementing it one by one, as we hear from members. They go, oh, it would be great if we could get, you know, the market-based data in there. We're like, we're on it, great. So it just takes some time from a development standpoint, but it is something we are proud of. And it also helps people looking for spectrum, to be honest. We've had quite a few people with success stories looking for that, you know, needle in a haystack, you know, in Chicago or New York City, one channel. And they sign up for what we call a market area report within Spectrum Intel. So you can do research, and you can also sign up for a market. And every week you get a report of the activity in your market from an FCC application and licensing standpoint. And so when you actually see an entity like a license go to inactive, that's like, you know, prime target to be able to see if you can get it licensed at the site that you need. So we've had quite a few people using that market area report and coming back to us, and then they're just like, here, license it for us, certify it. and we run the analysis, it works, and they're off and running, they get a license, a month later. But it's a great tool, and we'd love to do a demo for anybody that's interested.
I can tell you, I for one, as I'm sure you probably are aware, am one that is keenly interested in some of the ongoing development that EWA is working on. So so I'm going to stay very close to that one myself. As the demand for private wireless just continues to grow, and it's across all markets. I think you mentioned that. You mentioned a couple of the tools that you guys have developed, Spectrum Intel and License Bank, but generally, how does EWA keep pace as the demand grows, as the industry changes? Have you implemented any other changes to expand the organization's role and responsibilities for private wireless?
Well, we know that we're not getting any more spectrum. So it's one of those things, like with some of the proceedings and different filings that we've made with petitions, is trying to, I guess it's deregulatorize, certain bands, and, recommending some rule changes to accommodate it. We know that broadband is here, and broadband is, everybody wants it. And again, not just utilities, there's other private entities, business enterprises that need it and want it. They just need the spectrum that has the bandwidth to be able to accommodate it. So it's something that, by us looking at literally everything that is in front of the FCC, what we manage, like, for instance, just throwing this out there, and there's nothing pending on it, UHF. Is that a viable option at some point in the future? It would be much larger than, an 800 megahertz rebanding and a 900 megahertz transition, because, it's been around for so long, and there's hundreds of thousands, if not millions of licensees. But it's looking at those different types of opportunities for growth to be able to support the new digital equipment that's coming out from the different manufacturers, and trying to stay on top of it, lock and step with them.
We talked about lots of different things here that EWA does, and for those of us that may be hearing about some of this or all of this for the first time, there's a lot here to take in, and it may all be running together in our minds, and may take some time to soak in a bit. Could you distill it down a little bit for us and tell us if for a utility that wants to really get the most out of EWA, what would you say? What would you tell them?
Well, I think, right, of course, we're a membership organization, so I think membership is important. From that perspective, EWA has, with our advocacy as well, we have a bi-weekly regulatory call that our outside regulatory counsel, Liz Sachs, actually manages the call, and we provide an update every 2 weeks to our membership of different proceedings at the FCC that we're involved in and or we're monitoring. There's some proceedings that we choose to take a step back and just kind of see what the comments are. So the way the FCC process with proceedings happens is there's a comment period, and then there's a reply comment period. So strategically, there are times where we may not chime in on the first part under the comments. We then digest everything that gets filed by the industry, and then we decide whether we want to do anything from a reply comment standpoint. So we stay on top of those topics. We talk about them on our reg call, and we seek input from the membership. Like, we had a call this morning. It was scheduled this morning. It's every Tuesday, and I'm sorry, every 2 weeks on a Tuesday. And we seek input, and some calls it's quiet, and then other calls it's pretty interactive. And the one today, we spent probably 30 minutes talking about BDAs, like, because that's a hot topic right now, because a petition just got filed, and we got input from various members and, decided because it was, it got pretty involved. And we had more things to talk about because we always have an agenda. We were just like, okay, we're gonna have to sidebar and have a separate call on this and have it. We have a technical solutions committee that we discuss these things, but then also have, the few members that chimed in on the call join in on that further discussion as to whether and how EWA is going to comment in such a proceeding. So I just think that, the true value is in the membership in EWA is being able to participate in those things. If you're not able to participate, we also have a newsletter. We have a newsletter that comes out that is basically summarizing everything that was talked about on the reg call and then some. It also shows where EWA is going to be, because I have a lot of different speaking engagements. We do exhibit in a lot of different shows across the country, staying out there in front of everybody. Outside of that, we also have member memos that go out. And then there's also times where we don't just do a member memo, we actually send it out to the industry. We basically just pull email addresses from all the ULS data because if we think it's something important to send out to the industry so they're aware. Prime example, the looming federal government shutdown. That's something that is going to affect FCC processing. In the past, they were able to stay up and running with their own funding, being an independent agency, and we're hearing that may not be the case in this instance. So after midnight tonight, if they do shut down, they stop processing. Online filing is shut down. We as coordinators continue processing and certifying applications and sharing the what we call interfac, where we share the certifications with the respective coordinators, so we're not coordinating on top of each other. And so that continues. We just can't submit anything to the FCC. So to me, that's something that we need to, notify the industry about, because being in this business as long as I have, I will tell you, there's plenty of people out there that don't even know that the FCC issues a public notice. Because the FCC will issue a public notice saying that, what their procedures are and that they're going to be shutting down, and that's typical. But a lot of people aren't looking at the FCC's daily digest, to see, what public notice is being issued on anything, let alone something like that.
Oh.
So that's something that we feel is important to notify the industry so that they're aware as to why they can't get into the ULS or why their applications can't go in from their coordinators or in general.
Seem to be stalled. Yeah.
Right.
Let's switch gears a little bit and talk about spectrum policy. Outside the U.S., I understand there are several regulators maybe that have set aside spectrum specifically for utilities and critical infrastructure, or maybe one allocation for both. And 450 is maybe one, but I'm sure there may be some other bands. Do you think the FCC will ever make a new spectrum allocation exclusively for utilities?
My opinion, no, I don't think so. These days, and this FCC is all about spectrum sharing, and we're seeing more and more of it, whether it be through frequency coordination, like your EWA and UTC handle, or is it, like on the CBRS side, where you have your Googles and Federated Wireless and things like that, with the dynamic sharing. That just seems to be a common theme with the FCC these days, and I just see it being more and more in the future. And from EWA's perspective, we represent such a diverse group of people, of entities, that I think it's important for it just not to be one subset, and that just corresponds with some of our pending petitions too.
Well, if that plays out that way, and I think you're probably right, it sounds like we just need to make the most of what's available to us today, and push for policies that drive more efficient use of spectrum, as long as it doesn't impact reliability. And I think that's key. Which brings me to some legacy rules with with today's technology, do you think we still need distinct channel pools for primary private wireless users?
No, I don't think we need distinct pools. That's something that EWA has been advocating for with the other petitions that we've mentioned at 800 and UHF and VHF. Everybody is subject to the same rules. Coordinators have to follow the same rules, same contour analyses, all of that. That I don't think that it's necessary anymore. To me, it's archaic, and it's something from decades ago. That was even before digital came out, and it's just no longer makes sense in 2025. So I think it's important to be able to open that up, and I think it falls in line with this current commission with trying to reduce regulatory burdens, and we'll see what Chairman Carr does with it, but I think it's important to alleviate some of that.
Speaking of more efficient use of spectrum, we should probably include utility and public safety spectrum concurrence in that topic. Can you tell us briefly what that is and what work EWA may be doing there?
So I know, like at 800 megahertz, there have been, because we've assisted with a few of them, where it's a statewide public safety system, and critical infrastructure wants to join that statewide system. And I believe it's also been happening a little bit at UHF as well. But primarily, like at 800 megahertz, the way that the states are typically wanting it, they want the critical infrastructure entity to actually bring spectrum to the table to be able to accommodate their needs by adding on to it. And so EWA has been an advocate for that for many years. And I tell you, it's crazy to me that the FCC still puts these things out on public notice, where they've approved various different utilities adding on to a statewide system, because they actually have to file a waiver to be able to get permission to do it. And again, that is just seems so archaic to me. And they've approved it every time. And so it's like, to me, it's just a waste of resources, inside the FCC and externally, that it just adds time to the overall process it's already a lengthy process, because critical infrastructure has certain approvals that they have to go through. Same thing with public safety. So you add that all together, and it just adds time. And I just think that's a great example of one that they should automatically approve. And critical infrastructure and public safety go hand in hand for the most part. So it doesn't make any sense to me.
Another opinion question for you, and thinking, I guess, selfishly on behalf of utilities, do you think the FCC will ever consider critical infrastructure like utilities as vital as public safety when it comes to spectrum policy?
I think it is now, to a certain extent, in some cases. But that's tough, because from an advocacy perspective, you have different opinions too. So it's like, you could have public safety filing against critical infrastructure, filing up against public safety. So, I think in certain respects it is, but then on certain points, they're going to come out of the woodwork and they're going to go at each other, right? And then from EWA's perspective, we'll try to chime in to kind of soften the blow a little bit and see where we can chime in and we can help. But one thing that EWA has advocated for in various different proceedings, and we try to footnote it, I know Liz tries to cite to it as often as possible, is the definition of critical infrastructure from an FCC standpoint is very limited compared to like the DHS definition. And, I joke about this, like when I speak at different conferences and things like that, but like nothing against tow truck operators, but there's tow truck operators that are permitted under the FCC definition as critical infrastructure. That makes
Wow.
no sense.
Wow.
I don't think we need those labels and those categories.
Yeah, I'm
So,
sure they probably love that that privileged label, but it doesn't do
Right.
any good for the other critical infrastructure. One last thing before we go to audience questions. As EWA CEO, what keeps you up at night when you think about private wireless for critical infrastructure? What keeps you up at night?
you know, again, being a membership organization, it's maximizing the benefits that EWA provides to its members. You know, that keeps me awake at night. It even kept me awake at night before I became CEO. It's something just very near and dear to my heart, and the advocacy side of things is very important as well. You know, because if you don't have associations like EWA out there trying to drive the change at the FCC, then who's going to do it? And again, sometimes it's better as a united front. So joining forces with like the other coordinators is also important. One of the other things is, you know, growth, you know, always looking for what else can we get involved in, right? Example, a few years ago, we got awarded a certification for M-band. It doesn't have anything to do with utilities, but medical body area networks. You know, the little wireless little stickers that, you know, go on the patients and how that's going to work. And that's at 2.3. And so the FCC certified EWA as the sole frequency coordinator for that band. And, you know, so it's looking at where we can benefit our members and what we can get involved in to assist them with, you know, their initiatives going forward. And that's the biggest thing that keeps me awake at night, along with, you know, obviously keeping the morale of my employees up to par and making sure everybody's happy.
The blocking and tackling of
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
All right.
I
Bobby,
think the biggest thing is just remaining diverse. So
there you go. Bobby, let's bring in a few audience questions, and after that, if we still have time, I'd like to come back to Robin for one last closing question before we wrap up. But let's. Do you have anything from the audience?
Right. Yeah. Well, first of all, thank you. I was taking notes, and really that was some great insight. So thank you for doing that. I'm going to encourage everyone who's on the audience to type in your questions into the question tool, and we will get to as many of those as possible. But I'll start with a couple that have come in. This one I'm not sure about, but I'm sure you are sure about the answer to this. But what do you think of the FCC's delete, delete, delete initiative?
the triple D. That's the other thing in my career. I've never heard of a proceeding labeled that way. I don't know about you, Randy, but like
Never
even
even close. No.
Gives me a chuckle. So part of it is the goal of it from Chairman Carr's office is to reduce the regulatory burdens. Fully support that. There are, you know, just looking at even just Part 90 rules, there are rules that have been in there for 40 years that are no longer applicable. But it's a huge rule part. You know, so like looking at it and trying to figure out what should be deleted, because there's rules that are connected to each other and it's just like a wicked web. So I appreciate the fact of what they want to do, and they have been doing it. I think the one thing that I think is interesting is, you know, I think the recent thing I saw, it was a video clip, and I also saw it quoted somewhere that, you know, they've deleted like 70,000 words from the FCC rules. And I think that's great. I just think it's interesting that we're down to the number of words, but It's a huge undertaking though, so I appreciate the FCC staff undertaking this and diving into it. It's just something that's going to take some time because, you know, we're like one part of a very large world of FCC rules and different subparts. So I am sure that there's plenty of rule sets. The ones I've been seeing have been with like the Media Bureau and things like that, which, you know, you think that, you know, Part 90 rules are old, Media Bureau rules are old too. So it's something that should have been taken on quite some time ago. So I do applaud them for doing it. I just don't know when our world is going to get, we're going to benefit from it.
Impacted, yeah.
Right. Right.
That's a good point. Good point. Okay. I will go to the next question. What are your thoughts on the FCC's foreign ownership NPRM proposing that all FCC regulates certify whether they are controlled by or subject to the jurisdiction or direction of a foreign adversary? Long question.
That is a long question. Good question though. So Congress basically, and I understand why they're doing this. You know, they want to make sure that any US based company that is doing business with the FCC, right, is not being controlled by a foreign government. So I appreciate where they're coming from. I'm not quite sure how you tackle it, because it's like, do you add another question to the FCC's forms from that perspective? And if somebody, I say this jokingly, but if somebody's being controlled by, you know, the North Korean government, are they really gonna, like, you know, raise their hand and say and offer that up now as opposed to 10 years ago? So and again, I'm completely joking with that. I do appreciate the initiative of where it's coming from. I just don't know how they're going to implement it. We recommended when EWA filed in it, either it being on the form or like a one-time acknowledgement or certification saying whether they are or they aren't. So it's not something that continuously offlines applications for the same entity all the time. Because as soon as you answer a question like that, in that way, it's going to offline your application every single time, presumably. So that adds to delays in processing of applications and things like that. So that's another proceeding we chimed in on very generically, and support where they're coming from, because it makes sense. But we'll see what happens with that. We're monitoring it just to kind of see where the FCC goes with that.
Yeah, makes sense. Yeah, one more, and then I'll turn it back to you guys. Kind of a two-part question. Does EWA assist with selling or buying spectrum, and is EWA a spectrum broker?
So first question, do we assist with buying and selling? We do. So we have folks that come to us, member or non-member, they come to us looking for spectrum. We also have members that are looking to sell. So part of our newsletter that we have that goes out every 2 weeks, we have a section, a spectrum listing section that, you know, it doesn't identify who the parties are, but it at least tells you the band and in what area of the country that it's for sale. And, you know, we've helped people with it. We can help them with, you know, introducing them to the party that's selling or vice versa. We can also help with the FCC filings. And, you know, with that, you know, it's very critical. One of the things that we've noticed in our industry, I'm kind of going off on a little bit of a tangent, but with assignments and transfers of control, it requires FCC approval, and it's prior FCC approval. So like even with internal, like moving of assets, moving of FCC licenses from an internal entity to another internal entity, they call that a pro forma assignment, but it still requires FCC approval, and you have to do it. You have to get that approval prior to finalizing the transaction. So that's something that EWA, we do probably a few thousand of those a year, and help folks with it. We're not officially a spectrum broker, but labeled that from that perspective, but we do assist parties on each side with the buying and the selling. Good question.
Wonderful. Thank you for that. I'm going to pause there because I know you have a next question, and I will turn it back to you, Randy.
All right. Thanks, Bobby. And Robin, thanks to you for all the insights and the straight talk.
Sure.
Final thoughts, I guess. One key takeaway that you would like utilities to walk away with from the webinar, what would that be?
Well, I think one of the biggest things is that you have options, not only just, from a spectrum perspective, but also from a frequency coordination perspective, with partnering, with helping with spectrum solutions, whether it be from frequency coordination to selling and buying, or even just trying to understand different spectrum bands out there and use cases and things like that. That's like the biggest thing that I think is helpful, is just knowing that you have other options that are out there other than what you may be used to. And hopefully you've learned some things, I've been able to share during this webinar. There's definitely options out there for broadband with the different proceedings that are going on at the FCC. There's other entities out there. Again, there's 800 megahertz. There's a pending proceeding there with, the T-Mobile grain spectrum. And I look at that as an opportunity, not just for utilities, but, for any business enterprise that's looking for a private LTE solution, right? And, I know that CBRS, that's been out there, 1.4, there's just so many different bands out there that are opportunities. We just need to break down some of the regulatory barriers to be able to assist with that. So hopefully you found a lot of this information helpful, and it educated you and opened your eyes up to who EWA is and why we're so passionate about what we do.
Very good. Well, thanks again, Robin. Bobby, that's it for us. We'll send it back over to you.
Well, thank you. And,
Thank
I want to echo that. I'm thrilled that you guys were willing to come on UBBA webinar and do this as great members. We come together. I'll see you, both your teams, at the UBBA Summit and Plugfest the first week of November in Charlotte, and then the EWA Wireless Summit is the second week of November in Ohio. So really great ways to engage, continue the conversation. I want to encourage everyone to do that. And if you want to follow up with these guys directly, please feel free to reach out. If you can't find their email, contact UBBA and we'll find their email for you. But thank you both so much for taking time out of your very busy travel days and your schedules and being on our webinar today. I hope you have a great day, and I'll see you very soon. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Bobby. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thanks, Randy. Take care.
Thanks, Robin.